Dr. J-Ho Park pulled his protective suit tighter around his body as he walked through the smoking remains of the alien spacecraft. The Zelati warship had crashed in the mountains outside Seoul 3 days ago, and this was the first time the research team had been able to safely enter the wreckage. The ship was unlike anything human engineers had ever seen before. The walls were made from some kind of living metal that still pulsed with faint energy even after the crash. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing softly in colors that hurt human eyes to look at directly. "Over here," called xenobiologist Sominit Lee from deeper inside the ship. "I found something that you need to see immediately." Park made his way through twisted corridors filled with alien technology toward Lee's voice. The emergency lighting from their human equipment cast strange shadows on the organic-looking walls, making the entire ship feel like the inside of some massive creature. He found Lee standing in what appeared to be a laboratory or medical facility. Strange instruments hung from the ceiling, and tubes filled with glowing liquid connected various pieces of equipment. But at the center of the room was something that made Park stop breathing for a moment. It was a pod made from the same living metal as the ship's walls, but transparent on one side like a window. Inside the pod was a small figure that looked almost human, a child who appeared to be about 6 years old, sleeping peacefully in some kind of artificial fluid. "Is it human?" Park asked, though he already suspected the answer would be more complicated than yes or no. "Close," Lee replied, checking her scanning equipment. "The basic structure is human, but there are modifications everywhere. Enhanced muscle density, improved nervous system, organs that don't exist in normal human biology." Park studied the sleeping child through the transparent wall of the pod. The boy, it was definitely male, looked completely normal except for slightly larger eyes and skin that had a faint silver tint under the artificial lighting. "What do you think it is?" Park asked. Lee had been running tests on the pod and its contents for the past hour. "Based on the genetic scans, I believe this is a hybrid. Human-based genetics, but heavily modified with Zelati enhancements. Is designed to learn human tactics and social behavior by living among us, then return to lead an invasion force." The implications hit Park like a physical blow. The Zelati had created what appeared to be a human child, but was actually a sophisticated biological weapon designed to infiltrate and destroy human civilization from within. Security Chief Dong-ho Kim entered the laboratory at that moment, took one look at the pod, and immediately reached for his sidearm. "We need to eliminate this threat immediately," Kim said, his voice cold and professional. "This is a living weapon specifically designed to destroy our species. We cannot allow it to survive." "Wait," Park said, stepping between Kim and the pod. "Let's think about this carefully before we make any irreversible decisions." "Think about what?" Kim demanded. "The aliens created a perfect infiltrator. It looks human, but it's programmed to betray us. There is nothing to think about." Lee looked up from her equipment with an expression of scientific curiosity mixed with deep concern. "Actually, there might be something to consider. The programming appears to be incomplete." "What do you mean?" Park asked. "The biological modifications are finished, but the psychological conditioning shows gaps. It's like they ran out of time before they could complete the mental programming that would make him automatically hostile to humans." Kim remained unconvinced. "Incomplete or not, this thing is still designed to learn our weaknesses and use them against us." Park stared at the sleeping child and began to form an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. What if we could turn that advantage around? What if we raise him as human instead of letting the Zelati complete his programming? "That's impossible," Kim said immediately. "You cannot change genetic programming with good intentions." "Maybe not genetic programming," Park admitted. "But we might be able to influence learned behavior. If the psychological conditioning is incomplete, that means his personality is still developing." Lee understood what Park was suggesting, and her expression showed both excitement and terror. "You want to raise an alien weapon as if it were a human child?" "I want to see if 18 years of human love and education can overcome whatever hostile programming the Zelati managed to install," Park replied. The debate continued for hours, with Kim arguing for immediate elimination and Park insisting that the risk was worth taking if they could turn the Zelati's greatest weapon against them. In the end, Park's argument won. They extracted the child from his pod, gave him a human name, Tae-Minute Choi, and arranged for him to be placed with a foster family who would never know his true origins. The Zelati had expected their weapon to infiltrate human society, learn their tactics and weaknesses, then return to lead the invasion that would destroy Earth's civilization. They had never considered the possibility that humans might teach their weapon to love instead of hate. The sleeping child who had been designed to be humanity's destroyer was about to discover what it meant to be human. Foster parents Haejin and Sung-ho Choi received their new son on a cold Tuesday morning in November. They had been waiting for 3 years to adopt a child, going through endless paperwork and interviews with government agencies. When social services called to tell them about a 6-year-old boy who needed a home, they said yes immediately without asking too many questions. Tae-minute arrived at their small apartment carrying nothing but a single bag of clothes and looking around with eyes that seemed to take in every detail of his new environment. He was quiet during his first week, observing his new parents carefully and speaking only when directly asked questions. He seems very intelligent, Haejin told her husband after Tae-minute had solved a puzzle designed for children twice his age. But there's something different about him. He learns things so quickly it's almost frightening. Sung-ho worked as a mechanic at a local garage, and he was impressed when Tae-minute watched him fix a broken radio and immediately understood how the electronic components work together. Most kids his age can barely tie their shoes, he said. This boy understands complex mechanical systems just by looking at them. But what impressed them most was not Tae-minute's unusual abilities, it was his kindness. When he saw his new mother crying while watching a sad movie on television, he brought her tissues without being asked. When their elderly neighbor struggled to carry groceries up the stairs, Tae-minute helped her even though he was still small himself. The monitoring scientists who observed the family from a distance were amazed by what they witnessed. Dr. Park had placed hidden cameras throughout the apartment building and assigned teams to watch Tae-minute's development 24 hours a day. His exceeding every projection we made, Dr. Lee reported during their weekly meetings. His physical abilities are developing exactly as the Zalati designed, but his emotional responses are completely human. Tae-minute started school the following year and immediately became the teacher's favorite student. He could read books meant for high school students, solve mathematical problems that challenged college freshmen, and remembered everything he heard or saw with perfect accuracy. But instead of using these abilities to show off or make other children feel inferior, Tae-minute used his talents to help his classmates. He tutored struggling students after school, shared his lunch with children who forgot theirs, and never made anyone feel stupid for not understanding something as quickly as he did. His teacher, Mrs. Young-soo Kim, called his parents for a conference after the first month of classes. Tae-minute is the most gifted child I've ever taught, she told them. But more importantly, he's the most caring. He seems to genuinely want to help everyone around him succeed. Haejin and Sung-ho Choi began to understand that they had been blessed with a very special child. They made a conscious decision to teach him humility and compassion, worried that his exceptional abilities might make him arrogant or separate him from other people. Being smart doesn't make you better than anyone else, Sung-ho told Tae-minute when he helped a younger child with homework. It just means you have more responsibility to help people who need it. Dr. Park watched these interactions through the monitoring equipment and marveled at what he was witnessing. The experiment was succeeding beyond their wildest expectations. Tae-minute was developing genuine human emotions and moral values that seemed to conflict directly with whatever hostile programming the Zalati had managed to install. The biological hostility triggers that should have activated by now are remaining completely dormant, Dr. Lee reported with excitement and concern. Human nurturing appears to be overriding his genetic conditioning. Tae-minute formed deep bonds with his adoptive family, his teachers, his classmates, and even strangers he met on the street. He seemed to have an unlimited capacity for caring about other people's well-being. When his neighbor's cat got sick, Tae-minute spent his own allowance money to help pay for veterinary treatment. When his friend's father lost his job, Tae-minute convinced his parents to invite the family over for dinner every week until the man found new work. By his 10th birthday, Tae-minute had become the kind of child that every parent hoped to raise. He was brilliant but modest, strong but gentle, confident but never arrogant. He excelled in school, sports, and social activities while maintaining the values that his foster parents had taught him. But Dr. Park and his team knew that the Zalati had been too sophisticated to rely on simple genetic programming alone. Hidden in Tae-minute's modified biology were fail-safe systems designed to activate when he reached physical maturity. The dormant programming is still there, Dr. Lee warned during one of their secret meetings. We can detect it in his brain scans, waiting like a time bomb. On his 18th birthday, everything will change. The alien engineers who had created Tae-minute had built multiple layers of psychological conditioning into his genetic structure. The first layer, basic hostility toward humans, had been successfully overcome by love and nurturing. But deeper layers of programming remained untouched, waiting for biological triggers that would activate as he became an adult. The scientists faced a terrible question that kept them awake at night. Would 18 years of human love and education be strong enough to overcome genetic imperatives that had been specifically designed to turn Time-Minute into humanity's destroyer? They had 8 more years to find out, and the fate of the entire human race might depend on the answer. Time-Minute woke up on the morning of his 18th birthday feeling like something fundamental had changed inside his body during the night. The sensation was difficult to describe, like discovering that he had been living his entire life with only half of his senses working, and now the missing pieces were suddenly activated. He sat up in bed and immediately noticed that his hearing had become incredibly sharp. He could hear conversations happening in apartments 3 floors below his family's home. His vision had improved so dramatically that he could see individual dust particles floating in the morning sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. But the most disturbing change was happening inside his mind. Thoughts that were not his own began flowing through his consciousness like water breaking through a dam. Information about human military tactics, weaknesses in Earth's defensive systems, and detailed knowledge about technologies he had never studied filled his awareness. "Happy birthday, son," called his foster mother Hyjin from the kitchen, her voice carrying the same warmth and love that had surrounded him for 12 years. But when Time-Minute heard her voice, something cold and mechanical in his mind immediately began analyzing her as a potential threat. Her vocal patterns, body language, and emotional responses were automatically catalogued as data points that could be used to manipulate or eliminate her if necessary. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He understood with horrible clarity what he actually was, not a human child who had been raised with love and care, but a weapon that had been created specifically to destroy the people who had given him everything good in his life. The biological imperatives built into his genetic structure activated with overwhelming force. His body demanded that he establish contact with the Zalati fleet, which should be arriving in Earth's solar system within months. Every enhanced instinct screamed that humans were enemies to be studied, manipulated, and eventually eliminated. "Time-Minute, breakfast is ready," Sung-Ho called from the kitchen, his voice filled with the same paternal affection that had helped shape Time-Minute's understanding of what family meant. But the alien programming analyzed his foster father's voice as belonging to a target whose elimination would serve the greater strategic goal of galactic conquest. Time-Minute ran to the bathroom and stared at himself in the mirror. His reflection looked the same as always, but he could see the silver tint in his skin that had been hidden by human perception for 18 years. His eyes had developed flecks of metallic color that marked him as something other than human. The door to his bedroom opened, and Dr. Park entered carrying monitoring equipment that Time-Minute had never seen before. "Fight it," Dr. Park urged, his voice filled with desperate urgency. "You are more than what they designed you to be." "You were watching me," Time-Minute said, his voice carrying harmonics that had never been there before. "All these years, you were studying me like a laboratory specimen." "We were protecting you," Park replied. "And through you, we were protecting all of humanity." The alien programming provided Time-Minute with detailed information about every monitoring device that had been secretly placed throughout his life. He now understood that his entire childhood had been an experiment conducted by humans who had never trusted him completely. But he also understood something that the programming had not anticipated: the genuine love and care he had received from his foster parents, teachers, friends, and community had been real, regardless of the scientific observation that surrounded it. His enhanced physiology began expressing itself in ways that made him incredibly dangerous. When he tried to open his bedroom door, his improved strength tore it completely off its hinges. When he attempted to pick up a glass of water, his grip crushed it into fragments that cut his hand. "I could hurt someone," he whispered, watching his wounds heal with alien efficiency. "I could kill everyone I care about without even trying." The thought terrified him more than the alien programming itself. He fled from his family's apartment, using physical abilities he had never known he possessed to run faster than any human could follow. He found himself in the mountains outside Seoul, where the enhanced speed and strength of his alien heritage allowed him to move through terrain that would be impossible for normal humans to navigate. But even in isolation, the internal battle between his programming and his learned humanity continued to rage. His foster parents found him 3 days later, having followed a trail that should have been impossible for regular humans to track. "You're our son," Hyjin said simply, approaching him despite the obvious danger he represented. "Whatever you were originally made to be, we raised you to be something better than that." Sung-Ho stood beside his wife, showing no fear even though Time-Minute's appearance had changed dramatically during his days in the wilderness. "We love you. That doesn't change because you're different from what we expected." The alien programming demanded that he eliminate these humans who posed a threat to his mission. But 18 years of being loved unconditionally by them had created emotional bonds that the Zelati engineers had never considered in their weapon design. Time Minute faced the most important choice of his existence: fulfill his biological purpose as humanity's destroyer, or betray everything his alien creators had intended him to become. The Zelati fleet materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 18 months after Time Minute's 18th birthday, their massive ships dropping out of hyperspace like dark clouds blocking out the stars. The alien vessels were enormous, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities, and they moved through space with the confident precision of a military force that had never experienced defeat. Fleet Commander Kexval stood on the bridge of the lead ship, studying the tactical displays that showed Earth's defensive positions. According to their calculations, their genetically engineered weapon should have spent the past year infiltrating human military systems and preparing the planet for easy conquest. Initiate contact with the infiltration unit, Kexval ordered his communications officer. It is time for our weapon to fulfill its primary function. But instead of the expected compliance signal from their planted agent, they received something completely unexpected: a broadcast transmission that was being sent simultaneously to every ship in their fleet and every military installation on Earth. "This is Time Minute Choi," came a voice that carried both human emotion and alien harmonics. "I was created by the Zelati to serve as their weapon against humanity. Instead, I choose to serve as humanity's protector against them." The transmission included detailed technical specifications about Zelati ship designs, weapon capabilities, defensive systems, and tactical strategies. Everything that their weapon was supposed to learn about human weaknesses was instead being used to expose Zelati vulnerabilities to Earth's military forces. "Impossible," calculated the ship's tactical computer. "The biological programming cannot be overridden by environmental conditioning." Commander Kexval opened a direct communication channel to confront their malfunctioning weapon. "You were created specifically to serve Zelati interests," he transmitted, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "Your biology compels obedience to our authority." Time Minute's response came from Earth's primary military communication center, where he was working alongside human engineers to develop countermeasures against the invasion fleet. "My biology was programmed by you," Time Minute replied, his voice steady despite the internal struggle he faced every moment. "But my humanity was taught by the people who raised me with love instead of hatred." The past 18 months had been the most difficult period of Time Minute's life. The alien programming continued to demand that he fulfill his original purpose, creating constant internal pressure that felt like fighting against his own nervous system. But the relationships he had built with his foster family, friends, and human community had proven stronger than genetic imperatives. Dr. Park watched from the military command center as Time Minute used his enhanced abilities and insider knowledge to help Earth scientists develop defensive technologies that could counter Zelati advantages. His unique combination of alien engineering and human values made him the perfect liaison between two completely different approaches to technology and warfare. "Your biological design included 18 years of covert observation and tactical learning," Dr. Park had explained to the military commanders. "But it also included 18 years of being loved unconditionally by human parents who taught him moral values that conflict with his original programming." Time Minute's foster parents, Haijin and Sung-Ho Choi, had insisted on remaining close to their son throughout the crisis, despite the danger posed by the approaching invasion fleet. They attended every military briefing, not as observers, but as the family of someone who was risking everything to protect the world that had given him a home. "You are betraying your own species," accused another Zelati commander, his transmission filled with the cold logic that characterized their entire civilization. "No," Time Minute replied, looking around the command center filled with human military personnel, scientists, and civilians who had become his extended family. "I am protecting my real species, the one that raised me to understand what love means." The concept was completely foreign to Zelati thinking. Their society was based on genetic determinism, biological programming, and the belief that nature always overcame nurture. They had created thousands of genetically modified warriors for previous conquests, and never once had their programming failed to produce the desired results. But they had never encountered a species like humans, who seemed to possess an unlimited capacity for turning enemies into family members through the simple act of caring about their well-being. "This deviation from programming is temporary," insisted Fleet Commander Kexval. "Biological imperatives will eventually reassert control over learned behaviors." "You're wrong," Time Minute said, standing beside his foster parents as Earth's defensive systems came online using technologies that combined human innovation with alien engineering principles. "You created me to be the perfect weapon, but humans taught me to be something better," a protector who chooses who he wants to defend. His choice to remain loyal to humanity despite his biological programming represented something the Zelati had never encountered in their centuries of galactic conquest: the power of nurture to completely overcome nature, and the ability of love to transform even the most sophisticated weapons into guardians. The invasion that was supposed to be humanity's destruction was about to become the Zelati's first military defeat, accomplished not through superior firepower, but through the simple human ability to raise their enemies' children as their own. The war that followed became something unique in galactic history, a battle between two completely different philosophies about what made intelligent beings who they were. On one side stood the Zelati, who believed that genetic programming and biological design determined every aspect of behavior. On the other side stood humanity, who had proven that love and education could overcome even the most sophisticated biological conditioning. Time Init found himself at the center of this conflict, using abilities that had been designed by alien engineers but guided by values that had been taught by human parents. His enhanced strength, speed, and intelligence made him capable of understanding Zelati battle tactics better than any human military strategist, but he fought with the determination and moral purpose that came from 18 years of being raised by people who genuinely cared about his well-being. The first major engagement took place when Zelati assault ships attempted to establish landing sites in Earth's major population centers. Traditional human weapons were largely ineffective against alien defensive systems, but Time Init knew exactly where the Zelati ships were vulnerable because he had been designed with complete knowledge of their technology. Target their power distribution networks here and here, he told Earth's military commanders, pointing to specific locations on holographic displays of the enemy vessels. Their energy shields cannot maintain full coverage if you disrupt these connection points. Commander Yongsu watched in amazement as Time Init's tactical recommendations proved devastatingly effective against the invasion force. Your weapon became our shield, he observed as the first wave of Zelati ships was forced to retreat with heavy damage. But what impressed the human military leaders most was not Time Init's knowledge of alien technology, it was his complete commitment to protecting human lives. During every battle, his primary concern was minimizing casualties among civilian populations, even when more aggressive strategies might have been militarily advantageous. The Zelati fleet commanders found themselves facing something they had never encountered in centuries of galactic conquest. Their own weapon was not only refusing to serve their interests, but was actively working to defeat them using the very knowledge they had provided him with. Recalibrate the biological programming, ordered Fleet Commander Kexval after the third failed assault on Earth's defensive positions. Increase the intensity of genetic imperatives until compliance is achieved. But the Zelati computer systems could not understand what they were actually fighting against. Their tactical analysis programs kept insisting that biological programming must eventually overcome environmental conditioning, because that was how their science had always worked. Impossible, calculated their most advanced artificial intelligence systems. Genetic imperatives cannot be permanently overridden by environmental conditioning. The weapon must eventually revert to original programming. They were wrong, and their failure to understand human nature became the foundation of their defeat. During the final battle for Earth's orbital space, Time Init transmitted directly to the retreating Zelati fleet, "You created me to be your perfect weapon, but the humans who raised me taught me to be their protector instead." His foster parents, Haijin and Sung-Ho Choi, had attended every military briefing throughout the war, not as scientists studying an interesting experiment, but as parents supporting their son during the most difficult period of his life. They sat in military command centers, stood on the bridges of warships, and provided the emotional support that kept Time Init connected to his humanity even when the pressure of alien programming tried to overwhelm his learned values. "We are proud of who you have become," Haijin told him after the last Zelati ship disappeared into hyperspace. "Not because of what you can do, but because of who you choose to be." The Zelati retreat marked the first time in their species' history that an invasion had been completely abandoned due to psychological rather than military factors. Their defeat came not from being outfought, but from being unable to comprehend how their most sophisticated biological weapon had been transformed by something as simple as being raised with love and care. Intelligence reports that reached Earth months later revealed that the Zelati collective had officially abandoned their entire program of creating genetically modified infiltrators. Their scientific analysis concluded that human society possessed unknown factors that could corrupt biological programming in ways that their science could not predict or counter. Time Init remained on Earth, using his enhanced abilities to help strengthen the planet's defenses against future threats. But more importantly, he had gained something that his alien creators had never intended to give him: the freedom to choose who he wanted to be rather than simply fulfilling a predetermined function. He established a new career working with Earth's Space Defense Forces, but he also returned to the small apartment where he had grown up, spending evenings with the foster parents who had taught him that being different did not mean being alone. He had been born for their war, designed to serve alien interests in destroying human civilization. But he had been raised for humanity's survival, taught to value life and love over conquest and destruction. In the end, nurture had proven stronger than nature, learned behavior had overcome genetic programming, and love had defeated the most sophisticated weapons that science could create. The ultimate alien weapon had become humanity's greatest defender, not through conquest and domination, but through compassion and the simple human ability to choose family over biology. *The end*.